Weaving has been around since the early Stone Age. The basic concept hasn't changed, but the speed and sophistication has. Millions of miles of fabric is needed to meet consumer demands today. It would have been impossible to feed this appetite if it were not for the industrial loom. This was possible only during the Industrial Revolution, 1760 to 1840, when new manufacturing processes were adopted, and during this transition, hand production changed to machines and new chemical manufacturing. Machine tools were developed and the factory system was on the rise. Textiles were the main industry of the Industrial Revolution as far as employment, the value of output and capital invested. The textile industry was also the first to use modern production methods. The Industrial Revolution was a major turning point in history. Almost every aspect of daily life changed. In some way, average income and population began to grow exponentially. Some economists say that the major impact of the Industrial Revolution was that the standard of living for the general population began to increase consistently. For the first time in history, several inventions in textile machinery occurred in a relatively short time period during the Industrial Revolution. From the invention of flying shuttle by John Kay, which was an improvement to looms that enabled weavers to weave faster, to establishing of first cotton mills across England in 1742. With spinning jenny invented by James Hargreaves in 1764. The first machine to improve upon the spinning wheel. And in 1764 the water frame invented by Richard Arkwright, the first powered textile machine. To 1804, where Joseph-Marie Jacquard invented the Jacquard loom, that weaved complex designs. Jacquard invented a way of automatically controlling the warp and weft threads on a silk loom by recording patterns of holes in a string of cards. Joseph-Marie Jacquard was not the inventor of the programmable loom, as many people imagine. Actually, he created an attachment to the loom, which played a very important role in the textile industry. Also in development of other programmable machines, such as computers. For example, the analytical engine of Charles Babbage. Joseph-Marie Charles, known as Jacquard after the nickname of his family, was born on 7th of July, 1752, in Lyon, France. He was the fifth of 9 children of Jean Charles, a master weaver of brocaded fabrics, and his wife, Antoinette Rive, who worked as a pattern reader. From the 9 children, only Joseph and his sister Clémence survived to adulthood. Like the sons of many Lyons weavers, Joseph did not go to school, because his father needed him to perform odd jobs in the workshop. Antoinette Rive died in 1762. And after her end, the family slid into poverty. When Joseph was of age to learn a trade, his father placed him with a bookbinder. An old clerk, who made up the master's accounts, gave him some lessons in mathematics. Joseph very shortly began to display a remarkable turn for mechanics, and some of his contrivances quite astonished the old clerk, who advised his father to put him to some other trade, in which his peculiar abilities might have better scope than in bookbinding. Surprisingly, when Jean Charles died in 1772, Joseph inherited more assets than anyone expected. His father's apartment, the workshop with 2 looms, as well as some other real estate. In 1778, he listed his occupations as master weaver and silk merchant, and apparently at that time he started seeking an improvement in the draw loom. In the same year he married to the rich widow Claudine Boichon. Their only son, Jean-Marie, was born in April 1779. In the next few years, however, Joseph took part in a number of dubious entrepreneurial investments and soon fell deeply into debt and was brought to court, losing his inheritance. So in 1783 he slid again into poverty. Claudine stayed with their son in Lyon, working in a straw hat factory, while Joseph tried his luck in other places as a lime burner, a laborer in a plaster quarry. Back in Lyon, Joseph prosecuted his improvement in the draw loom for the better manufacture of figured fabrics, and he brought out his contrivance for selecting the warp threads, which, when added to the loom, superseded the services of a draw boy. The adoption of this machine was slow but steady, and in 10 years after its introduction, many of them were found at work in Lyon. Unfortunately, Jacquard's pursuits were rudely interrupted by the Revolution, and in 1793, he and his son took part in the unsuccessful defense of Lyon against the troops of the Convention. And when the city fell, the two fled together. After seeing some active service in the Army of the Rhine, where Joseph rose to the rank of sergeant, in 1797 Jean-Marie was shot down in a battle, and his father returned to Lyon in 1798. Lost again the plot of his life. After a brief stay in the hospital, he worked at various odd jobs, repairing looms, weaving, bleaching straw hats, driving horse-drawn carts. It was probably in 1799, when he decided to return to the automation of weaving, an occupation, which will made his name unforgettable. In July 1800, Joseph Jacquard applied for his first patent, a treadle loom. Then a loom to weave fishing nets in 1803, and starting in 1804, the Jacquard loom, which would weave patterned silk automatically. Jacquard took out a patent on his first loom on the 23rd of December 1800. First looms of Jacquard were unsuccessful, however, not only because were not operating well, but also for strong opposition by the silk weavers. When in 1801, after a successful exposition in Paris, Jacquard exhibited his first loom in Lyon. The weavers, thinking their bread and butter endangered by the new machine, mobbed the inventor and broke up his invention. 3 times the life of Jacquard was threatened by fanatics. Jacquard describes the occurrence himself. The iron was sold for old iron, the wood for fuel, while I was delivered over to universal ignominy. Luckily, Jacquard's achievement having come to the knowledge of the prefect of the department, he was summoned before that functionary, and, on his explanation of the working of the machine, a report on the subject was forwarded to the Emperor Napoleon. The inventor was summoned to Paris with his machine, and brought into the presence of the Emperor, who received him with the consideration due to his genius. The interview lasted 2 hours, during which Jacquard, placed at his ease by the Emperor's affability, explained to him the improvements which he proposed to make in the looms for weaving figured goods. The result was, that he was provided with apartments in the Conservatoire des Arts et Métiers, where he had the use of the workshop during his stay, and was provided with a suitable allowance for his maintenance. While in Paris, he examined the loom of Jacques de Vaucanson in the Conservatoire des Arts et Métiers, and suggested various improvements in his own, which he gradually perfected to its final state. One of the first improvements of Jacquard was to eliminate the paper strip from Vaucanson's mechanism and to return to Falcon's chain of punch cards. Then, he tried to avoid the expensive metal cylinders of Vaucanson. In fact, the term Jacquard loom is a misnomer. Actually, Jacquard's invented an attachment, head, that adapts to a great many types of looms, that allow the weaving machine to create the intricate patterns often seen in Jacquard weaving. Thus any loom that uses the attachment is called a Jacquard loom. Each position in the punched card of the loom corresponds to a hook, which can either be raised or stopped dependent on whether the hole is punched out of the card or the card is solid. The hook raises or lowers the harness, which carries and guides the warp thread so that the weft will either lie above or below it. The sequence of raised and lowered threads is what creates the pattern. Each hook can be connected via the harness to a number of threads, allowing more than one repeat of a pattern. For example, a loom with a 500 hook head might have 4 threads connected to each hook, resulting in a fabric that is 2,000 warp ends wide with 4 repeats of the weave going across. In April 1805, the Emperor and Empress Josephine visited Lyon, and during their tour, they viewed Jacquard's new loom. Jacquard was granted the patent for Jacquard's loom to the city of Lyon. In return, Jacquard received a lifelong pension of 3,000 francs, a huge sum for the time. Moreover, he received a royalty of 50 francs for each loom that was bought and used during the period of 6 years. This was a generous attitude towards the inventor and made him rich. By 1812 there were some 11,000 Jacquard looms in use in France, and despite energetic French efforts to keep the technology secret, they were also beginning to appear in other countries. Jacquard's genius obviously lay not in originating the revolutionary ideas behind his loom, but in building upon the work of previous innovators, bringing their ideas together, adding his own insights, and solving a variety of practical engineering problems, to create an automatic loom that was fast, reliable and most importantly, commercially viable. Jacquard's loom revolutionized the speed at which decorated silk fabrics could be woven. Using the Jacquard loom, a skilled weaver could produce 2 feet of decorated silk fabric per day, compared with 1 inch per day that could be produced by a skilled 2-man draw loom team. In 1819, Jacquard was awarded by the government a gold medal and Cross of the Legion of Honor, for the invention of the automatic punch card loom. In the beginning of 1820s, Joseph-Marie Jacquard retired to the pretty village of Uhlans, a few miles from Lyons, where he enjoyed a prosperous rural life, even herding sheep. He died peacefully at Uhlans on 7th of August 1834, aged 82.